Have you ever stopped to think about how those massive global projects, like, say, fund whole new school systems or building infrastructure to cope with climate change, how they actually get financed, on a global scale?
Yeah, it's definitely more complex than just governments cutting checks. It involves a whole network of institutions.
Exactly. So today we're going to try and trace that evolution of global development finance. We'll peel back the layers on some of the world's most, well, influential international financial institutions.
Mm-hmm.
Our deep dive today, it's based on a whole stack of comprehensive sources looking into these often quite complex organizations.
Right.
And our mission really is to cut through all the acronyms. There are so many acronyms, and understand what these organizations actually are, why they even exist, how they work, and importantly, what their real world impact is. Especially, thinking about it from your perspective as an informed global citizen.
And understanding these institutions is just, well, it's absolutely key to grasping the whole global economic picture. They're really central to how countries collaborate, or sometimes, frankly, how they compete in shaping our future, how big development actually happens.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Maybe start at the beginning with probably the biggest name out there, the World Bank.
Right, the World Bank.
Now, we all tend to just say World Bank, but it's important to know technically that term usually refers to just two of its five institutions, the IBRD and the IDA.
That's the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the IDRD and the International Development Association, or IDA.
Yeah. So let's tackle the IBRD first. It was born really from the ashes of World War II, right? Back at the Bretton Woods Conference, mid-1940s.
1944. Started operations 46.
And it wasn't just about rebuilding Europe and Japan, although that was the initial focus. It felt like a bigger bet on global economic stability.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And its core purpose then and now is really about reducing poverty and promoting sustainable development.
Yeah.
But specifically in middle-income countries and those low-income countries that are considered creditworthy.
So how does it do that? What are the mechanics?
Well, it provides long-term loans, but also technical expertise, policy advice, that sort of thing. And what's really interesting is how it funds itself.
Right.
It issues these AAA-rated bonds, basically the safest investment possible on international markets that allows it to borrow really cheaply.
Ah, okay. And then it lends that money on.
Exactly. Offers it to member countries as low interest or sometimes market rate loans. And today, with nearly 190 member countries, its focus is much broader: infrastructure, education, healthcare, climate resilience projects. You name it.
Got it. And India's connection here.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah.
India was a founding member of the IBRD, and historically it's been one of the largest borrowers. That really reflects the IBRD's broad development mandate.
So what kind of projects are we talking about in India?
All sorts. Big infrastructure like the Smart Cities Initiative, the Ganga Rejuvenation Project, but also crucial social programs, education, health, even emergency responses, like during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Right.
And India borrows from both IBRD and IDA. Actually, it just depends on the project. But the key thing with IBRD is it channels global capital to countries that are sort of ready for larger, more market-oriented projects.
Okay, that makes sense. A powerful mechanism. But while the IBRD helps countries that can eventually pay back market rate loans, there was still a massive challenge, wasn't there? How do you support the absolute poorest nations, the ones maybe too fragile even for low-interest debt?
Exactly that gap. That's what led to the creation of the IDA, the International Development Association. It's often called the concessional arm of the World Bank.
Concessional arm,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so the IDA provides interest-free loans, you can actually call them credits, and also grants, technical assistance. And it specifically targets the world's poorest countries, those that simply cannot borrow from the IBRD on market terms because it's just too expensive or too risky for them.
When did IDA come about?
It was set up in the early 1960s precisely to help low-income countries break out of that poverty trap.
And the funding, where does that come from if they aren't borrowing on markets like IBRD?
It's mostly from donor countries. Wealthier member countries contribute, and the funds get replenished every 3 years. The latest cycle is IDA 20, which runs from 2022 to 2025.
And these loans or credits, they're very different.
Oh, completely. They're incredibly long-term, interest-free, with repayment usually stretched over 30 or 40 years.
Yeah.
And they focus on real basic needs: health, education, sanitation, rural infrastructure, agriculture.
Who qualifies?
There's a threshold. Countries are generally eligible if their per capita income falls below a fixed, very low level, around 3,353, for example.
So the IDA is really the World Bank's lifeline for the most vulnerable nations.
Precisely.
What's really striking here is India's own journey with the IDA.
Isn't it?
Right.
India was a major IDA recipient for decades, but then it successfully graduated in 2014 because of its economic growth.
Which is kind of the goal, right?
Exactly. It's a testament to how effective IDA can be. And now India actually contributes to IDA replenishments as a donor country. It really shows that whole development journey.
Does India still receive any IDA support, though?
Well, yes, interestingly. It still accesses what's called blended assistance, a mix of IBRD and ID, but only for very specific targeted sectors or regions, like remote areas in the Northeast or certain rural development projects. So it's a much more nuanced relationship now. And what's fascinating, really, is this clear division of labor within the World Bank Group. You've got IBRD for market-ready development, IDA targeting extreme poverty. It addresses different stages, different needs.
That structured approach makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's add another crucial piece to the World Bank Group puzzle. This one has a profoundly different focus. The International Finance Corporation, the IFC.
Right, the private sector arm.
Exactly. Unlike IBRD or IDA, which mostly lend to governments, the IFC works directly with private businesses in developing countries.
Yeah, it acts more like a catalyst, investing directly. Its mission is still about ending extreme poverty and boosting shared prosperity, but, and this is the key bit, it aims to do it through private sector solutions.
How does that actually work in practice?
This is where the IFC gets really innovative. It provides loans, yes, but also equity investments, taking a stake in companies. It offers advisory services. And crucially, it actively mobilizes other private capital and sort of de-risks investments to draw in more money.
Why was it set up? What was the gap it filled?
It was formed back in the mid-1950s. The thinking was, look, public development finance alone isn't enough. For sustainable growth, you absolutely need a thriving private sector. The IFC was created to bridge that gap, to encourage private investment where it might not otherwise go.
And India's connection with the IFC?
Also very strong. India's been an IFC member since 1956. The IFC has invested quite a bit in Indian companies across renewables, finance companies, startups, healthcare, clean tech. Areas like Tata Clean Tech, Bandhan Bank, Renew Power are examples.
They're quite diverse.
Very. And it also specifically supports things like women-led smaller businesses, digital inclusion, and issuing green bonds in India, really pushing that sustainable finance and ESG agenda, environmental, social governance.
Right.
And if you connect this to the bigger picture, it really shows a critical shift in how we think about development. It's an acknowledgement that long-term growth often really hinges on a robust private sector, not just government projects.
Okay, so we've looked at the World Bank Group's global mandates, IBRD, IDA, IFC, but you mentioned earlier that needs can differ by region.
Definitely.
So let's maybe zoom in on a major regional player, the Asian Development Bank, or ADB.
Right, the ADB. It's a regional multilateral development bank focused specifically on promoting social and economic development in Asia and the Pacific.
Is it structured like the World Bank?
It's actually modeled quite closely on the World Bank, yeah. But it's tailored, obviously, to the specific needs and context of Asian countries. It provides loans, grants, technical help, equity investments to its member countries.
Does it lend just to governments?
No, it does both. Sovereign lending to governments and also non-sovereign lending, so directly to the private sector, much like the IFC does globally.
And its funding.
Similar model, again, capital subscriptions from its members, and it also raises funds on bond markets. It was set up in late 1966, and its headquarters are in Manila in the Philippines.
And the membership, is it just Asian countries?
Mostly, but not entirely. There are 68 member countries currently. Around 49 are from Asia and the Pacific, but then you've got about 19 from outside the region. Big players like the U.S., U.K., France, Canada are members too.
Interesting.
And India.
India is a founding member, right from 1966. And it's consistently been among the ADB's largest borrowers.
How does the decision-making work there? Who holds the influence?
Well, like the World Bank, it operates on a weighted voting system based on capital share. Japan and the United States are the largest shareholders, each holding roughly 15.6% or so.
Wow, so quite significant influence.
Yeah, absolutely. They have a big say in policy. China's next, around 6.4%, and India is right behind, about 6.3%, followed by Australia.
And what are the ADB's priorities right now?
They have this thing called Strategy 2030. It outlines key priorities that really reflect that regional focus. Tackling poverty, pushing for gender equality, addressing climate change, making cities more livable, fostering regional cooperation, promoting rural development. Yeah, things very relevant to Asia.
And for India, what does that support look like on the ground?
You see ADB support in projects like smart cities, again, rural roads, metro rail systems like the Delhi-Meerut RRTS or the Chennai Metro renewable energy projects, sanitation, quite a wide range.
And this raises an important question, doesn't it? How do regional banks, like the ADB, maybe tailor solutions more specifically to the unique challenges and also the opportunities of their particular region compared to the global institutions?
That's a great point. It makes perfect sense. And speaking of unique challenges and opportunities and how things evolve, the whole landscape of development finance isn't static, is it?
Not at all.
Let's introduce the idea of newer, maybe alternative development banks that have emerged more recently. Some might be seen as challenging the traditional players, others may be complementing them.
Right, the newer players.
First up, let's talk about the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, or AIIB.
AIAB, yes. Based in Beijing.
So this is another multilateral development bank, but its focus is very squarely on financing infrastructure and also other productive sectors, mainly in Asia, but potentially beyond too.
And the key difference here, compared to, say, the ADB, is that it's definitely more Asia-centric, and it's widely seen as, well, China-led. That sets it apart immediately from the ADB or the World Bank.
When did it come into being?
It was proposed by China back in 2013. Things moved quickly, the agreements were signed in 2015, and it started operations in early 2016. Headquarters are in Beijing.
Why was it formed? What was the rationale?
A few reasons, really. One was to help fill the huge infrastructure investment gap that exists in Asia. Another was perhaps to provide an alternative to the more Western-dominated institutions like the World Bank and IMF, and also to promote regional cooperation, often linked, people say, to China's Belt and Road Initiative.
And the membership. Who's in, who's out?
It's got broad membership now, over 100 approved members, including almost all major Asian countries, except Japan, notably. Lots of European nations, too. But crucially, the USA and Japan are not members.
That's significant. And the voting power, is it weighted like the others?
Yes, it is weighted based on shares. And China, being the proposer and largest contributor, holds the largest share by far, around 26.6%. That effectively gives it veto power over major decisions.
And India?
India is the second largest shareholder, but quite a distance behind China at about 7.6%. Still significant, though.
What kind of infrastructure does AIIB focus on?
The emphasis is on what they call green, resilient, and inclusive infrastructure. So, transport, energy, especially clean energy water projects, urban development, and also digital infrastructure technology.
And India's relationship with AIIB, you said it's the second largest shareholder.
Yes, and this is really fascinating. India isn't just a founding member and the number 2 shareholder, it's actually the largest recipient of AIIB funds.
Really? More than any other country?
By quite a margin, historically. It's received over $9 billion plus. This has funded critical projects like the Mumbai Metro, Bangalore Metro expansion, significant renewable energy projects.
Wow, so a very important relationship there, playing both sides, shareholder and top borrower.
Exactly, a very interesting dynamic.
Okay, so that's AIIB. Now let's talk about another one of these newer players, the New Development Bank, or NDB. You might remember being called the BRICS Development Bank initially.
Right, the NDB, set up by the BRICS countries.
And what's its purpose?
Again, it's a multilateral development bank. Its goal is to mobilize resources for infrastructure and sustainable development projects, specifically in emerging economies. It's often framed as an alternative, particularly for the Global South, to the World Bank and IMF.
Why did the BRICS countries feel the need to create it?
Largely to reduce perceived dependence on those established Western-dominated institutions, and to promote greater financial autonomy for BRICS members and other developing nations.
When was it set up?
The agreement was signed in 2014, and it started operations in July 2015. Its headquarters are in Shanghai, China.
Who are the members now? Is it still just BRICS?
The founding members were Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, the original BRICS. But it has expanded. New members include countries like Bangladesh, the UAE, Egypt, Uruguay. Membership is technically open to all UN members, but the BRICS nations still hold significant voting power.
Ah, okay. And what's unique about the NDB, particularly its structure?
This is probably its most distinctive feature: the capital structure and voting rights. It has an authorized capital of $100 billion US. But uniquely, each of the 5 founding members contributed equal shares initially.
Equal shares.
Yes. And they retain equal voting rights. That's a massive departure from the weighted voting systems of a World Bank, IMF, or even the AIIB.
So no single country has veto power.
Exactly. That equal voting for founders makes it a fundamentally different kind of institution. It feels almost like a deliberate statement about, well, a different approach to global finance governance.
What areas does the NDB focus its lending on?
Similar areas to the others, really. Energy, transportation, water supply, digital infrastructure, climate resilience projects, things crucial for emerging economies.
And India's role?
India, as a founding member, contributed $10 billion to the initial capital. And it's been a significant borrower, too, receiving over, I think, $5 to $6 billion in loans for projects, things like rural road improvements, renewable energy expansion, smart city initiatives, building greener highway corridors. So what's really fascinating here is seeing the emergence of these new banks, AIIB, NDB. It definitely signifies a shift, a changing geopolitical landscape in development finance. And you see these contrasting models, the weighted China-led structure of AIIB versus the equal voting NDB.
Absolutely. Okay, wow. We've covered a lot of ground there, from the post-war originals to these newer players. So, bringing it all together, what does this all mean? What should you, our listener, take away from this?
Well, I think the main thing is appreciating the sheer diversity of these institutions. You've got the post-World War II rebuilders like the IBRD laying that foundation. You've got the IDA focused on the very poor. Then the IFC mobilizing the private sector. And now these major regional banks like the ADB and the newer alternatives like AIB and NDB, they all aim to foster development, yes, but they have quite different mandates, different ways of funding themselves, different memberships, different governance structures.
And what really stands out, especially from our perspective, is India's role, isn't it? It's been so dynamic and seems increasingly influential across so many of these institutions.
Absolutely. India's journey is remarkable, from being a major recipient, particularly from the World Bank Group early on, to now being a significant donor to ID, a founding member of these new banks like AIB and NDB, and a major shareholder with a real voice in several of them.
So understanding these banks, these complex acronyms, it really does give you a much clearer picture of how global progress actually gets financed. And you see the complex interplay of international cooperation. And sometimes, yes, competition too.
Definitely. It's the plumbing of global development in a way.
Exactly. And perhaps it leaves us with a final thought, something for you to ponder. Consider how this increasing number and diversity of international financial institutions might impact the future of global development. Does having more players, more options, does that lead to more efficient, more tailored aid? Or does it risk maybe fragmenting efforts, creating confusion, or even new forms of influence that countries need to navigate very carefully?
That's a really crucial question for the future of development finance. Definitely something worth thinking about.